Good evening. We are ready to get started. It is 8:40 tonight. We're learning Maseches Succah, Daf Tes, in my childhood seat where I sat for Shabbos, and we're also right next to a really nice pile of food. So for those of you who are not here, I just want to make you a little bit jealous. 2910 West Estes, you're welcome to join. We'd love to have you. We are about 8-9 lines down on Chav Tes Amud Aleph, and we are starting at the two dots of Yaradu Geshamim. Yardu Geshamim is, of course, important. We live in Chicago. It does rain here in the community. And there are some categorical halachos about when we are obligated to no longer make a bracha on the sukkah. And this is a halacha that we refer to as mitzayir pater min hasukkah. So says the Gemara as follows: Yardu Geshamim, that if the rain comes down, and we had said that it is dependent on the mikvah, that if water were to go into the porridge or into the oatmeal and ruin it, that would be the point at which a sukkah is considered to be mitzayir. So says the Gemara 8-9 lines down Chav Tes Amud Aleph Tana. We learned in a brisa, Misha Tisrach HaMikvah Shel Grisen. That's when it's made out of a flour base of barley flour. So says the Gemara, an interesting story. Abaye have a kayasiv kame de Rav Yosef b'matzlalta. So Abaye, 4th century, was sitting with his Rebbe Rav Yosef b'matzlalta in a sukkah. Noshav zika, there was a wind that blew. V'kamaisi tzibusa, and it brought about tzibusa. Take a look at Rashi just to our right. Dibur hamaschel tzibusa, ksamin, little slivers of wood, shel schach hayamashir alamaycha. We have this all the time in our sukkahs. If you have the bamboo, little pieces fall off, all wood falls off, it happens all the time. That is that the same thing as water being dropped into the oatmeal? Is that the same thing as the threshold of our Mishnah, which said Mishatzisrach HaMikvah? So Amar Lehu, Rav Yosef says, Amar Lehu Rav Yosef, Pnu li mani mehacha. Take out my kelim, take out my utensils from the sukkah. We're all done. What does that mean? Amar le Abaye. Abaye says to his Rebbe, V'hatnan Mishatzisrach HaMikvah. The standard is not the same. Our Mishnah and the brisa that we quoted at the beginning of this Gemara said that the threshold is mikvah, is that when the water ruins the porridge. But here you have little pieces of wood falling in. Who cares? Take out the pieces of wood and there's nothing wrong. Just you'll be fine. So says the Gemara, Amar le, and here we are potentially able to learn a very important halacha. Amar le, Rav Yosef says back to Abaye, Ledidi kevan de anino da'atoy. Since I am anino da'atoy, I'm a sensitive soul. I hate when food falls into my, when anything falls into my soup, even pieces of wood. This is a very interesting idea. And if we were to paskin like Rav Yosef, it would add a tremendous amount of subjectivity to what mitzta'er means. So I personally hate cold weather. Hate it. 20 degrees, I do not want to be outside. That is not teshvu ke'in taduru. No way. My gas bill is ridiculous in the winter. I don't like it. So does that mean mitzta'er for me? You can tolerate 30, but I can't tolerate 30 with a coat, with layers. How do we define teshvu ke'in taduru? So clearly Rav Yosef here in the Gemara was indicating that it is somewhat subjective, because even though the Mishnah gave the parameter that when the water falls into the porridge and ruins it, that's your threshold from getting out of the sukkah. Here we see something different, something seemingly less, when little tiny shards of bamboo fall into the chicken. Big deal, remove the little piece of bamboo and keep eating. So Rav Yosef adds that element of subjectivity. The Gemara continues on this line of thinking. We're a quarter of the way down. Chav Tes Amud Aleph Tana Rabbanan. Let's say that you're eating in the sukkah and all of a sudden it's a downpour. It's a downpour, but it's a short downpour. But you left the sukkah because it was raining appropriately. So the halacha is ein matrichen oso la'alo sad sheyigmor seudaso. You do not have to, and this is halacha l'maisa quoted in Shulchan Aruch. You do not have to go back into the sukkah. If you leave a sukkah because you're mitzta'er, and then whatever the tsar was is removed, you no longer have to go back into the sukkah until, and look at the language, it's very important, until you finish the meal. Namely, once you finish the meal and then you want to go back in and eat something else, no, then you're chayiv to go back in the sukkah, because the mitzta'er pater min sukkah, and therefore you leave, you don't have to go back. Therefore, the reason that you're going to be lenient is because you're pater, but you don't have to go back only for that meal. If a person sleeping under the schach, the yardu geshamim v'yorad, and a person, the rain comes down and a person leaves the sukkah. Here too, ein matrichan osolalos ad sheyeor. Very difficult word to understand here, as we'll see in a moment, but it seems to be sheyeor, that it becomes light. So we're 1/3 of the way down, 6 lines before the wide lines on Chav Tes Amud Aleph. This is the din that if you are sleeping in the sukkah, it rains, you come out, you don't have to go back in until it becomes light again. But the Gemara questions, is that really the right word, sheyeh, or that the light should become should be coming up. Ibayalahu ad sheye or with an ayin that you should wake up. Namely, let's say you wake up at 2 a.m., but the rain has stopped. Now go back in the sukkah. Is the threshold once the rain stops and you wake up, or are you or ad sheye or until the light comes up in the morning? So let's say you go to bed at 11 p.m. At midnight, the rain starts coming in. At midnight, you go inside and you crawl into a regular bed inside your house. Then you wake up at 2 a.m. You have to go back into the sukkah. So if the language of the Bryce is sheye or with an ayin that when you wake up, so then anytime you wake up in your comfortable bed in your house, but it's no longer raining, you should go back out in the sukkah. That's with an ayin. Or do we say no? Even if you wake up at 2, the Bryce was with an aleph sheye or when there's light in the sky, and since there's no light in the sky, you are allowed to go back to sleep. So that's the question of the Gemara. Ad sheye or with an ayin. Do we say that once you wake up, even if it's 2 a.m., you're obligated to go back in the sukkah? Or no, if you wake up at 2 a.m., you're fine because it's ad sheye or with an aleph that there should be light. Toshma, says the Gemara, a very complicated answer. Ad sheye or ve'ya'ale amud hashachar, until it's bright and it is amud hashachar. That is a stira. That is a stira because bright is at sunrise, netzachama. That's when the sun breaks the horizon and the many minutes prior to it. However, amud hashachar, according to the mathematical version, not the degrees version, but mathematically, it's 1 hour and 12 halachic minutes. It's 72 halachic minutes prior to sunrise. It's pretty dark out. There's maybe a slight light on the eastern skyline. So says the Gemara, Tarte, how can you say those two things in one breath? You're saying sheye or with an aleph that it's bright out, and at the same time that you're saying that, you're also saying it's yala amud hashachar. Those two terms are contradictory. So says the Gemara, you're right. And the real answer is Ela Ema ad sheye or ve'ya'ale amud hashachar. And here is the Gemara's compromise. Assuming this conclusion is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, it seems to be that it is. And the halacha would be as follows. If a person wakes up in their house and it's no longer raining, so then if they wake up and amud hashachar has passed, you are then required to go back into your sukkah. At that point, you should go back in your sukkah. It doesn't have to be bright out. You have to be awake, and it has to be amud hashachar. We're just about halfway down, and the Gemara here is quoting the line from our Mishnah that says, Mashal lama davar dome, and we had said that someone was going to spill a pitcher of water on someone else in the Mishnah. We didn't know who it was. You could look back at the Mishnah on the bottom of Kaf Ches Mud Beis, 12 lines or so from the bottom, and it says Mashal lama davar dome, and our Mishnah said le'eved sheba limzog kos le'rabo. He came to bring his Rebbe a cup of wine, v'shafach lo kiton al panav, and he poured a ketone, a pitcher of water on him. We don't know who the pronouns are speaking about. So the Gemara says 2 lines, 3 lines before the wide lines on Chav Tes Mud Aleph, who's pouring water on who? What is the mashal that the Mishnah is trying to give? So the Gemara answers, Tashma, the Brisa writes to Tanya as follows. Shafach lo rabo kiton al panav. Ve'amar lo ifshi b'shimushcha. It is the Rebbe pouring the pitcher of water on the face of the Talmud, saying, I have no need for your services. And this is the mashal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving us a bit of a knock, that if it rains on the sukkah, it's like HaKadosh Baruch Hu splashing water in our face. I don't want you here now. I don't want you here now. Bad omen. Bad omen. And because that's true, the Gemara is now going to speak about bad omens from now until the end of the parak, and then we'll begin on the next parak as well. And that is speaking about eclipses. We know now scientifically that eclipses happen at pretty measured intervals. We could probably measure it down to the minute. The next lunar eclipse, which is where there's a full moon and then Earth and then sun in such a way where the moon is completely shadowed. It's May 16th of this coming year. A little ominous. It's my wife's birthday. Just saying. Happy birthday. So says the Gemara. What? I don't know what we're going to be able to. I don't know if I'm going to be teaching Daf Yomi on that day. I don't know what to say. Tanu Rabbanan. So the rabbis taught us when the sun has been stricken, namely when there's a solar eclipse, which we know is where the moon interrupts our field of vision between Earth and the sun. That's simin ra l'chol ha'olam kulo. That's not good. Mashal l'mahadavar doma. The Gemara gives a beautiful mashal, second of the long lines. L'melech basar b'dam she'asa seuda la'avoda. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm speaking in Nimshal. A king makes a suda for all of his servants. Hiniach panas lifnehem, and he puts a lantern. Rashi actually uses the word lantern here. If you can find that Rashi, I didn't mark its location, but it's somewhere over here. It's there you go. Hiniach panas. It's 4 lines before the wide lines. Rashi says lantirna. Lantirna, it's a lantern, and a panas in modern Hebrew is a flashlight. So it's the same exact idea. So v'hiniach panas lifneim, and he put a lantern on the table. And then koas aleim, he got upset at them. The Amar la'avado, tol panas mipnehem v'hoshivam b'choshech. Remove the panas from them. So in other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the king, and he gave us a beautiful Suda. He gave us a world with the sun in it, and a world with all the luminaries. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is upset at us, he takes away the light, and then everyone has to sit in the dark. So that's how we look at a at a solar eclipse and say that that's not good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us a slap on the wrist. The Brisa continues 3 lines into the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down. Tanya Rabbi Meir Omer, Kolzman Sheme'oros Lokin, whenever the other luminaries of the sky, referring to the moon and other such constellations, whenever those are covered, whenever those are Lokin, Simin Ra l'Sonei and Shel Yisrael. This is a bad simin for the Sonei and Shel Yisrael. This is actually a reference to Jews, not to non-Jews. Mipnei Shemilumadin b'makosein. What does that mean? That they're trained in their beatings. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi, the last of the short lines of Rashi, Dibur Hamaschil, Mipnei Shemilumadin b'makosein. Kol minei puranios haba'in ba'olam. Whenever there's something bad that happens in the world, yesh lehen Yisrael lid'og. It is upon the Jews to be concerned. V'lomar lo basim ze ela bishvilenu yoser misha'ar umos. So why is that? Something bad happens in the world. There is a tsunami. We're supposed to be the ones to look at it. So Rashi explains, Mibnei shehen regilin lilkos yoser mikula. We've been through the mill more than most. It's not this pompousness of like, oh yes, we're the Am HaNivchar, so therefore everything that happens in the world it's not that. Is that you get beaten down more. You should expect that when something's happening, it's in reference to you. And in fact, back in the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down, the Gemara says, Mashal Sofer, it's like a Rebbe who comes to yeshiva, Sheba lebeis hasefer uritzura biyado. He brought out the belt, right? He's got a piece of leather in hand. Midoig, who's the one who's going to be concerned? Who is sitting in the back like, oh shoot, today is the day. You know who it is? It's the kid who usually gets the beating. Misha ragil lilkos b'chol yom v'yom hu doeg. And that's why when we look out at the world and we see that there are things happening, we have to ask ourselves, normally we're the ones who are getting the beating, so what's going on here? And we should be introspective, and we should not have the perspective of, because it's incorrect, we should not say, we're the Jews, we're special, this is for us, even if you get hurt. That's not what it means. That's not what the Gemara says. It's not how Rashi explains the Gemara. It's mi doeg, mi sheragi lilkos b'chol yom v'yom hu doeg, because we've been through quite a bit, historically speaking, so therefore we should be concerned yet again. The Gemara continues, Tana Rabbanan Bisman Shacham Aloka, as well, another reference, a brisa that speaks about a solar eclipse, Simin Rala Ovdei Kochavim. This is a little different than the previous iteration. Here we're saying that it's a Simin Ra for those who worship idols. Levana, Loke, if you have the moon that's being blocked, this is a lunar eclipse. Simin Ra L'Sonei and Shel Yisrael. This is not good for Jews. Mipnei She Yisrael Sonehem. Simin Ra.
For the haters.
Yes, it is, but it's a metaphor speaking of the Jews. And you'll see in the next line, Mipnei She Yisrael Monin LeLevana, that the Jews, we are solar. We're lunar. We're very lunar. We're actually a mix between lunar and solar, Gregorian in our terms. Gregorian and the Jewish calendar intertwine very heavily. We know, for example, Pesach is Chodesh HaAviv, so we have to regulate our calendar, our Gregorian calendar, to mix with the lunar calendar properly. It's really the other way. Our lunar calendar is spot on, and we have to make sure the other calendar matches. Either way, because we use the lunar calendar, so when we look at the Levana Loka, when we have a lunar eclipse, that is more indicative of something that's wrong, as opposed to for the non-Jews. They use a Gregorian calendar, they're using a solar calendar, and because of that, they should be more concerned about that. Loke b'mizrach, if the covering has taken place in the east, simin rali yoshvei mizrach, meaning if it happens in the morning, because the sun rises in the east. So if the eclipse happens in the morning, those people who live on that horizon should be more concerned. But Ma'irav, if it's when the sun sets, simin rali yoshvei Ma'irav, then those people on the west should be concerned. Be'emtza harakia, what if it happens at high noon? So then says the Gemara, simin rala chol ha'olam kulo, everyone should be concerned, not kishmak. Panav domin ledam. What if the face of it has a redness to it? So then cherev bala olam. Then that's going to be punishment by sword. Lisak. But if the moon, if the sun or moon has a color of a darker goat hair, which is what the Gemara says. Rashi says that's what we're talking about here. This Rashi is 3 lines into the wide lines. In the middle of the line, lisak. Asui minotza shel izim. It's from the threads, from the hair of the goat. Udoma l'shachor, a darker color. So then says the Gemara, we're 12 lines up from the bottom, then what's the punishment? Chitzei ra'a boin le'olam. Then the arrows of pain, of hunger, of famine will be brought to the world. Why chitzei? Okay, that requires an agarata. That requires a maharsha. That requires us to look a little bit more. Lezu. If the moon has both colors to it, the redness and the darker color, then cherev v'chitzei ra'a boin le'olam, then everything is bad. Laka b'knisaso, if the moon covering happens, the language here is very difficult, and the Gemara is going to call this out in a minute. B'knisaso, in the Havamid of the Gemara, we assume b'knisaso is when the sun is going, where it's entering away from us, which we would normally call leaving. So, but b'knisaso here means when it's leaving our field of view. So then per anus shohelavo, then the bad news is not yet to come. It'll come the next morning. It'll come in the future. So if it's when the sun rises, then maheres lavo, then it's going to happen right away. That knisaso means when the sun rises, and yitziaso means when it leaves. That is more logical to our language, but again, just it's two ways of saying the same thing. As an aside to all of these bad things, that when these bad things do happen, so says the Gemara, that when it comes to any nation that is getting loka, that is getting its consequences, it always has its sarim, its officers that are being punished with it. That all the miracles that were done in Mitzrayim against the Mitzrayim, the punishment always included the sarim, it always included the greats. But if we Jews would do what we are supposed to do and keep halacha, it's a formula. We were given the formula. If we Jews were doing right, you don't have anything to worry about. We're given the guarantees. We're given the guarantees in the Gemara. Shene'emar ko'amar Hashem al derech hagoyim al telamadu me'osos hashamayim al techatu ki yechatu hagoyim mehema. The goyim will be afraid of it. Ovdei kochavim yechatu ve'ein Yisrael yechatu. So if we do ritzono shel makom, which is not easy, but if we do ritzono shel makom, then we don't have to worry about these bad omens. Says the Gemara, 8 lines from the bottom, 7 lines from the bottom of the page, and from here until the end of the parak, we're going to focus on units of 4, as you will see. Tanu Rabbanan, Bishvil Arba'a Dvarim Chamaloke. There are 4 reasons why we would see a solar eclipse. Al Abbezdin Shemeis Ve'enu Nispad Kehalacha. If you have a person who dies, an Abbezdin who dies, and he did not get an appropriate eulogy. If a woman, a na'ara me'urasa, who was screaming, she was being taken advantage of, and she called out and nobody helped her. In scenarios where there's homosexuality, and in a case where 2 brothers are killed at the same time. And there are 4 reasons as to why there would be a lunar eclipse. Al kosfe plastar, for people who write documents. What's wrong with writing documents? Take a look at Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom. Rashi says, Dibur Hamas al kosfe plastar, shtaros mizuyafin, forged documents. Of course, that's a whole different ballgame. Why didn't the Gemara say that? I don't know. I guess plastar. Plaster, we've had that word before. No, psach there, I'm thinking about from Maseches Tamid.
Plaster, what you put on the walls.
Plaster, yeah. But that's good. Very good. Yeah, it's the same word. Very good. Nothing gets by you. I love it.
Arch will translate
it. To plaster? So when you write forged documents, that's one reason why there would be a lunar eclipse. For people who testify falsely. For someone who takes the responsibility to raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael, because it's very hard to manage them and they graze in other people's fields and there's theft and all that, it's problematic. And as well for cutting good trees. Take a look at Rashi over here. Beautiful Rashi. 3 lines from the bottom. Even if you own the tree yourself, you're just destroying it. It appears like that you're kicking Kadosh Baruch Hu away, and with all of the blessings that he has given you. About 1 minute after I read this line, someone walked in my house and said, Phil, am I allowed to cut my neighbor's tree? It's a fruit tree. Literally, like 1 minute, I jaw dropped. I'm like, what? And they repeated the question as though I didn't hear it. I'm like, no, hold on 1 second. This was a woman whose husband learns Daf Yomi. I'm like, did you just Come on, this is like a game of some kind. It's not, because this is tomorrow's daf. Are we ahead already? No, this is today's daf. It was crazy. Anyways, I didn't know the answer, so I asked Rabbi Robin, said, you're not allowed to cut down a fruit tree. Period. He said there are some kulas in the poskim, a kula that he would not give out, that if you give the tree to a guy, like a whole, he doesn't, but he doesn't give out that kula. However, he said you are allowed to do like basic trimming. That would be considered acceptable. This tree is owned by their neighbor, so they could trim at the fence line, and it'll take a long time for the tree to grow. I mean, it's thick wood. It takes a long time for the tree to grow and then to regrow fruit. Once a year, they cut the tree, and that would be permissible. So that's also another reason, if one does cut down those trees, as to why. Yeah, you got to get it right.
You don't got like a club length.
No club. No, that's not a golf game.
You go all the way
Ubi
to
shvil. Now here we're jumping off the page a little bit, because this is not our sugya. We started out by saying that if it rains in a sukkah, it's like a keton shamayim being splashed in your face. So then we went from there to talk about lunar and solar eclipses, which are a siman ra. And then we said the 4 things as to why the solar and lunar eclipses may happen. And now we're just taking the number 4 and carrying it on to other sugyas. So it's sometimes helpful to see that bigger picture in the flow of the Gemara. What's the next set of 4? There are 4 reasons as to why property of people are nimsar lamalchus, that they would be taken over by the government. A person keeps a document that says, I've paid. And he keeps holding up the document to say, give me the item I paid. Give me the item I paid. He's a ganav, he steals. That's one reason. The al-malvei deribis, people who steal, people who charge interest. We don't charge interest to family members, and Jews are family members. So if you ever find someone who asks you this question on a plane, those Jews, you're allowed to charge interest to a non-Jew. No, we don't charge interest in the family. You're looking at it the wrong way. Well, this is my brother. It's different. You're not my brother. I'm going to charge you interest. That's the normal way of life. But when you're family, you don't charge interest. That's just how it works. That's what families do. It's not just a spin. It's actually what the din is. It's not apologetics. It is what the halacha is, that we are considered a unit. Next, ve'al shahaya sipek biyadam limchos velomichu. Talk about a very important way to pronounce a word. It's not safek biyadam limchos. He wasn't sure if he should make a stink. It's sipek biyado. He had it within him to make a stink about something, velomichu, and he did not. What is this talking about? Take a look at the first Rashi on the page. Dibur hamaschil ve'al shahaya sipek biyadam shel ba'alei batim halalu. There were these balabatim. They had the power, sipek biyadam, to be limchos biyad ovre averos shebedoram. There were people in their communities who are not keeping halacha properly. Shedivreim nishmayin, their words would be heard. Machmas oshram, because they're very wealthy people. Habrios yireim mehem velo michu. So I'm sure we've all seen these kinds of videos over the year, where you've got people who, not really because of their Talmud Chacham status, but because of their communal status, they're going to call foul and say, this is not right, what's happening over here. Those people have a requirement to do so, and to not do so would earn them a consequence of having their property being taken over by local government. Again, I don't know what the flow of events is between the not saying something and everything getting taken over in a lien. Maybe the IRS will come out. I don't know how these things work, but that's what the Gemara says, that people who have power, even if it's only due to wealth, and something's going on in the community, throw your money where your mouth is and get up on the bima and say, this is not right. Do it with permission of the rabbi, though. Last, a person who says, I'm willing to give tzedakah, and he mentions it publicly, so someone makes a pledge and they don't pay. This, by Simchas Torah, by Makor, so that we try to keep a good system. It's always so hard. How do we know who gave what? So you should keep your own cheshbon. You should keep your own cheshbon, because if you make a pledge, it's your burden to pay. Okay, so they made a mistake in which letter they put there, which number they put there. It's still your burden.
I was drunk. It's Simchas Torah.
That's a problem
That's why
too.
they're bidding on Shmini Atzeres.
The last number 4. Here we go. 2 lines down. Chav Testament Beis Zama Rav. This is even worse than being absorbed by a government. This one's going into hiding forever. Timyon. Tamun is to be hidden, so it means you're going to lose it forever. Al kovshei schar sachir. This means that you're delaying in paying someone. Rashi says this as well. Rashi 5th line. Kovesh shemadchehu Come back tomorrow. I know I didn't mean tomorrow. I meant next week, right? You're just pushing them off. So that's one reason to lose your income. That's actually stealing someone's money and not paying them. Is to remove the burden from your own shoulders. Is to shirk responsibility. That's also not acceptable. And being a Baal Gaiva. The Gasus Haruach Keneged Kulan, this is the worst of them all. They're equivalent to all of the other ones. The Gasus Haruach is pretty bad. Aval, be'anavim, when it comes to people who are humble, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Ksiv va'anavim yirshu aretz v'hisangu al rov shalom. That person is able to have shalom and they're going to be yirshu aretz. They're not going to lose their properties, which is what we were talking about. They're not going to lose their properties. They're going to maintain it. And that is the blessing of being an anav, among many others. Hadron Allah Yashan, Yiratan. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. New parak. Give you a moment to open your new books for those of you who are art school. Pause for station identification.
You're supposed to eat.
Not yet. What do we have? Another 30 blocks. We got a little bit of time.
Every character should have celebration.
We're literally sitting here with a plate of chicken in front of us. So, all right, here we go. New parak. Lulav hagazel. Now we're going to get into some of the halachos of the lulav and esrog. We spoke about this briefly already in regards to sukkah. What if a sukkah was stolen? Now we're talking about lulav hagazel. So says
the cheap part.
not always.
Yeah,
it depends. 99 cents each a jewel. Lulav hagazel v'hayavesh pasal. If a person steals a lulav and they want to be yosef in mitzvah with it, they cannot. And if the lulav is yavesh, if it's dried out, so that's pasal. And that's actually, in fact, some of the Meforshim point out, lo hamesim yahalaluka. Those who are dead cannot praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's a passive reference to a lulav and esrog. Lo hamesim, it's dead. You can't do the na'anuim with a dead lulav. It's yavesh. Lo hamesim yahalaluka. It's a nice reference to the pasuk, although not the halachic reason. Shel ashera v'shel ir hanidachas. If you have a lulav that is from an ashera tree, if the tree was idol worshipped, or v'shel ir hanidachas, where robe of that community is an idol worship and it needs to be destroyed, that lulav could be the most perfect one in its aesthetics, but halachically it is pasul. Niktam rosho of the top gets cut off, or nifritzu alav pasul. We'll have to learn what nifritzu alav means, but the spreading out seemingly in some way nifritzu. We'll see it's not so simple because the next word is nifridu alav kasher. So we'll have to learn about all of these terminologies in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer yagdenu milamala, that we should tie them. Is he arguing? Is he not arguing? We have to discuss that too. So they'll be tying up the top of the lulav as well. Tzine har habarzel ksheros. These are certain types of lulavim that came from a certain mountain in Eretz Yisrael. Those are kasher. And at a minimum height, says the Mishnah, lulav sheyesh bo shlosha tvachim kedei lena'anea bo kasher, that if you have a lulav that's 3 tvachim, so and is therefore long enough to do na'anuim, so then the halacha is that is kasher. Now, what does our Mishnah not do? It does not distinguish between day one and any of the other days of the holiday, which is problematic. Says the Gemara, kapasik v'tani. The Mishnah just spoke categorically. Loshna doesn't seem to make a difference if it's b'yom tov rishon v'loshna b'yom tov sheni. It seems to not make a difference whatsoever what day is what, but that doesn't really work. Bishlama yavesh. In regards to the first din of our Mishnah, when it says lulav hagazel v'hayavesh pasal, I could understand by lulav hayavesh, bishlama yavesh hadar ba'inan v'leka. I need it to be beautiful, and it's not beautiful because it's dead. And once it loses its green, it's not coming back. So I could understand why that would be the case, why there's no difference between day one and the rest of the days as to why a lulav yavish would be pasul all days. Ela gazul. But if we're talking about a lulav hagazul, bishlama yom tov rishon, I understand why a lulav hagazul wouldn't work on day one of Sukkot. That I understand. Tichsiv lachem, mishal lachem. Because as we say more casually, the lulav has a din of lachem. It has to actually be yours. So I could understand why on day one, if you stole a lulav, it wouldn't work. Ela b'yom tov sheni amai lo. But the only time we have a din of lochem by a lulav is on day one. But it should have been mutter, not to steal it, but you should have been able to do the mitzvah at least on days 2 through 7 with the lulav. It should have been the case. Why didn't our Mishnah? Here's really the question. If it's true that the din of lochem of a lulav hagazol only applies to day one, then why can't you be yotze on days 2 through 7 with the lulav hagazol? And if so, why didn't the Mishnah add that? So Amar Rav Yochanan, last line of Chavtes Amud Beis. Amar Rav Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Mishum Tahavalei Mitzvah Haba Be'Avera. This is a larger concept than the din of lachem. Even though it may be true that there's a din of lachem on day 1 and there's no din of lachem on day 2, and therefore maybe we should have said it's mutter to use lulav hagazel on day 2, but you can't because there's a more overarching concern, which is it's a mitzvah haba be'avera. Mitzvah haba be'avera is when the sequence of events that led you to your mitzvah included an avera. So I found the lulav and esrog in your property and I stole it. Oh, Baruch Atah Hashem. No, that's mitzvah ba be'avera. It's day 2 and there's no din of lachem. I know it's day 2 and there's no din of lachem. I don't care. It's a mitzvah ba be'avera. You can't steal someone's lulav and esrog and hope to use it. And therefore, says the Gemara, that's why our Mishnah does not distinguish between day 1 and the rest of the days, because it's not a concern about lachem. It's a concern about mitzvah ba be'avera. Where do we know this from? We know it from a pasuk, and this pasuk is in Sefer Malachi. V'heveisem gazul ve'es hapiseach ve'es hachola. The pasuk says that if you were to bring a Kadosh Baruch Hu, a stolen animal, or an animal that has a mum, a pisech is an animal that's damaged, ve'es hachola, a sick animal. So the rest of that pasuk reads, Ha'ertze osa mi'erchem amar Hashem. Do I want those things from you? You're going to bring me an animal that you stole, an animal that has a permanent mum, and an animal that's sick. So then says the Gemara the following: Gazul dumya de piseach. Something that's stolen is similar to something that has a permanent mum. Ma piseach lesle takanta. Just like an animal that's missing a leg, for example, can't be fixed. Af gazul, so too that which you stole, lesle takanta. Oh, so therefore, this is the pasuk that's a text proof for the idea of mitzvah ba be'avera, that which you stole, it's tarnished. You can't undo the theft, and it's mitzvah ba be'avera. 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day. I don't care when you stole it. It's mitzvah ba be'avera. And then the Gemara makes things more complicated, and that is with the following idea: Lo shna lifnei yeyush. Yeyush in halacha is a relinquishing of ownership of something because you've given up hope. So we have a general principle of stam yeyush is shloshim yom. So let's say you bought a beautiful lulav and esrog, perfect. And let's say that it would last for 100 days without the esrog shrinking, no blemish, perfect. You bought it 32 days before the holiday started. And now I'm the thief, I stole it, and I want to use it on the 3rd day of Pesach, on the 3rd day of Sukkot. Can I do that? So says the Gemara, it depends on Yeyush. So, but it doesn't depend on Yeyush because it says lo shna lifnei Yeyush v'lo shna la'achar Yeyush. It seems to be that relinquishing ownership, which gives the thief the opportunity to actually be the owner. It's not mutter. Let's say I steal your fork and you say, I don't care about the fork. Yeah, he's a thief, but I don't care. Good, now I halachically own this. But before you relinquish ownership, I can't own this because somebody else owns it and they haven't been miyayish. So if I steal something, the Gemara says it makes no difference if the owner was miyayish or not, if he relinquished ownership. So asks the Gemara, Bishlama lifnei yeyush. I understand if the owner has yet to relinquish rights, Adam ki yakriv mikem amar rachman v'lavdidehu, then for sure that's going to be a problem because it's not yours. It has to be yours and it's not yours. Ela la'achar yeyush, but if what we're talking about is la'achar yeyush, where the owner did relinquish ownership, so then hakanye b'yeyush, then the thief, albeit through an isser, now owns that which he stole. The halachic mechanics is that once the original owner gives up, now I can actually own the item. Elalav, it must therefore be that to have a mitzvah haba be'avera, period. This is the strength of the answer of the question that we're saying. And why our Mishnah, which speaks about lulav hagazel v'hayavesh pasal, and it does not distinguish between day 1 and the rest of the days of Sukkot. The reason why is not because of lachem. Lachem only helps us with day 1. The reason why we have no distinction of days of day 1 versus the rest of Sukkot is because of mitzvah haba be'avera. I'm asking my own question here. I don't have an answer to this. This is a pasuk from Malachi. Divrei Torah midivrei Kabbalah lo yalfina. How are we learning the din d'oraisa of mitzvah haba be'avera? We're saying that you can't fulfill the mitzvah of lulav and esrog. Maybe it's because of the rabbis came along and it's only a mitzvah saseh. So as long as you're could be. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a question. Rabbi Yochanan, a quarter of the way down, 10 lines down.
Rashi says exactly that this is where we learn it from. It's a huge question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Remez?
Nope.
Not what Rashi says.
It's not what Rashi says.
That's
the flow.
answer.
The flow of the Gemara seems to be that it's a din d'oraisa. It at least implies that way, because we're talking about the mitzvah d'oraisa of lulav and esrog. That's what's implied. So it's not, I looked at this Tosos also a little bit. The beginning doesn't talk about it. I didn't get all the way through the end, but it bothers me a little bit. And maybe, I don't know, maybe the brisa that follows it, I don't know, doesn't seem clear to me as to why we would consider this a din doraisa. And the only answer, just a quick answer that would make sense is that the Chachamim had the right to be ma'akar davar mitzvah saseh shibator b'kum b'shei v'al taseh. We have that like the last day of Pesach where we don't put on tefillin. We have cases like that. We have plenty of cases like that. We have shofar. We have a lot of cases like that. But it seems a little balabatish to give such an answer here, and I don't know the right answer. It can't be that the Shas concept of mitzvah b'aver is derabanan. It just can't be. Just can't be. I didn't have time to look into it, but if anybody has an answer, we'd love to hear one. 8-9 lines down. Rav Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. My dechsiv, what does it mean? Ki ani Hashem ohev mishpat. Hashem says, I love justice. Sone gezel be'ola. And I don't like when people steal an ola. What does that mean? Mashal, lemelech basar adam, shaya over al beis hameches. You have a king, and the king is going through a tax collection. I guess today's equivalent of a toll booth, but not for fixing the roads, but it's actually meant for the government. It says the Gemara, Amar la'avodav, the king says to his servants, Tnu meches l'mochsim, take some money and please give it over to the mochsim. Please give it over to the agents who are collecting the money. Amrulo, the avodim say back to him, V'halo kol hameches kulo shelchahu. I don't understand why you're paying. It's right pocket, left pocket. The king has this thing of coins and he's given it up. And then when he gets back to the kingdom, he's going to get his coin back. So why is he paying anything? It doesn't make any sense. Tanu mikem l'mochsim, I'll give it over. So Amrulo, next line. Amar lahem, 1/3 of the way down. Lamed Amar Aleph. Amar lahem, mimeni yilmedu kol ovrei drachim. Everyone's going to learn from me. I'm their role model. And he says, if they see me paying, and even I am not exempt, and I'm the king, there's no reason why they shouldn't pay. Pasha, they should pay. The lo yavrichu atzman mina meches, then they're not going to try tax evasion. So Afa Kadosh Baruch Hu Amar, Ani Hashem sone gezel ba'ola. I really don't like this, and I'm going to model it for you, just like the king in the mashal modeled paying taxes. They're going to watch from me. I don't want your korban if you're going to steal it. Please don't give it to me. I don't want you to steal. So Kadosh Baruch Hu, instead of taking a korban, reach nichoach, I'm not interested. Theft is out. So then the Amoraim halfway down Lamed Amud Aleph says Itmar Nami. We have this idea quoted already in the not already. We have this idea quoted later in the Amoraim. It's Marnami, Amar Rabbi Ami, Yavesh Pasal Mipnei She'eno Hadar. A Yavesh that we said in the beginning of our Gemara. If you have a lulav and the lulav is dried out, so that's not Hadar. That doesn't fulfill the qualifications of the pasuk. And if it's dried out, there's nothing you can do about it. You can spray paint it green, but it won't be kosher. It's just not kosher. It's Yavesh. It's just what it is. And then what does the Gemara? What do the Amoraim say? Gazal Pasal. Why? Mishum dahabale mitzvah haba be'avera. So the Amoraim clearly learned this sugya the same way the Tanaim did, and they held that it wasn't that our Mishnah over here in the beginning of the parak on Daf Chavtes was saying lulav agazel ba'yavesh pasal. Lulav agazel is because of lachem. It's not because of lachem. Lulav agazel is going to be pasal the entire 7 days of Sukkot, 8 for us the entire time. Why? Because it's mitzvah haba be'avera, and mitzvah haba be'avera. This just doesn't work. You can't steal something and do a mitzvah with it.
What's the finish? Why would the Gemara use the Amoraim to bolster the Tanakh?
It's a great question in the flow of events. It's a great question. And you'll see in one moment why that was the case. And that's because there's an argument in the Amoraim. And that is Upliga de Rav Yitzchak. The Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Nachmeni, there was one Amora who didn't agree with this. Amar Shmuel, he says in the name of Shmuel, Lo shanu ela b'yom tov rishon. He says, no, the only time that I say that Lulav HaGazul is a problem is on day 1, where we have a din of lachem. Aval b'yom tov sheni, but on the second day, mitoch sheyotze b'shaul, yotze nami b'gazul. Since the din of lachem only applies to day 1, but on Yom Tov Sheni, where I'm allowed to borrow a Lulav and Esrog, so he says, just like I can borrow a lulav and esrog, I can also use a stolen lulav and esrog because there's no din of lachem. So to your question, not all the Amoraim agreed. We have an Amora who disagrees with the Tanoim seemingly, and the Gemara doesn't like that, and therefore they throw the question right back at him. Masiv Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Hey, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, what are you talking about, Rav Yitzchak? How can you say that that lulav hagazel in our Mishnah is only going to be asur on day one. What does our Mishnah say? Lulav hagazel b'hayavesh pasal. That's our Mishnah, right? The Mishnah on Chav Testament base, the first words of this parak of lulav hagazel. It says that if you have a stolen lulav or a dry lulav, the halacha is that it's pasal. What's implied from our Mishnah? It is a significant omission that our Mishnah doesn't speak about borrowing. We're talking about stolen. We should certainly be talking about borrowing. So the Gemara makes a deal. If you say lulav hagazel v'hayavesh pasal, it must be 2 lines before the wide lines. Ha shaul, had it been borrowed, it would have been kosher. So says the Gemara, emas. When would it have been that the borrowing is kosher? Ilema b'yom tov rishon, everyone agrees for sure you can't borrow on the first day. That's for sure. Haksiv lachem, mishel lachem. By the yom tov rishon, everyone knows that it's talking about day one. That's for sure. And if it's talking about day one, there's a din of lachem, v'hai lavdi dehu, and everyone agrees that if it's shaul, that if you're borrowing, doesn't work. Everyone agrees to that. Ella, it must be that our Mishnah Lab, it must be talking about B'Yom Tov Sheni. And yet, what does it say? The Katani Gazel Pasul. It still says if our Mishnah can't be talking about Yom Tov Rishon, because Shaul is not valid on Yom Tov Rishon, you can't borrow. It must be that our Mishnah is talking about Yom Tov Sheni. But if our Mishnah is talking about Yom Tov Sheni, then you just said Lulav HaGazel is Pasul. It implies that Lulav HaGazel is Pasul even after the first day. Kasha against Rabbi Yitzchak, who says that only the first day is asur, not the rest of it. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, really, we can still validate Rabbi Yitzchak's shita. La'olam really be Yom Tov Rishon. Yes, really, it is talking about the first, the Mishnah that we have here is talking about Yom Tov Rishon. The quote, Lomi Baya, end quote, Kamar. It's teaching me a Lomi Baya. What is a Lomi Baya? I don't need you to teach me this because it's obvious. I even would teach you something else. Lomi Baya, Shaul, Delavdi Dehu. I don't need you to teach me a case about that which is shaul, that which is borrowed. He doesn't even own it on day one. Aval gazul, maybe by something that's stolen. Ema, I might have argued an incorrect argument that stam gzela yeush bailimhu, then maybe we can say that in general, when something is stolen, the second it's missing, your brain turns a corner and says, I'm done. I'm not thinking about it anymore. I don't own it anymore. And if that's true, then the halachic mechanics of the thief becoming the owner kick in. So let's say someone grabs my phone out of my hand. It's when you relinquish ownership. So let's say someone grabs the phone out of my hand. And the second that happens, I'm like, I'm never getting my phone back. If that's how I felt, then that means that the thief can make a kinyan on that item now because I've relinquished ownership. That's yeush. So it says the Gemara, aim aval gazul, 3 lines from the bottom. Maybe with theft, aim, I might have argued that stam gzela yeush bailim hu uchadi deidami kamash malan, that that's not true. That we do not say that stam gzela is yeush bailim, that when something is stolen, that it is as though it is now owned by the other person. Kamash malan, that is not the case. We're going to stop right here. On Shabbos, we will pick up at an earlier time of 5 p.m. It's not going to follow or be preceded by a mincha. Sorry about that. But we'll pick up 3 lines from the bottom. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Thank you to my parents for hosting. We really appreciate it.
Would we name